For over 3 decades, the Lanarkshire town of Wishaw has simmered with a rage that few outside Scotland could fathom. Nestled between the ruins of Ravenscraig steelworks, shuttered in 1984 under Thatcher's policies, plunging unemployment to 50% by 1994, and the shadow of long-closed coal pits, the Craigneuk estate became a powder keg in the 1990s. This forgotten scheme, where heroin flooded in amid economic despair, turned into a brutal arena for 2 families, the Nisbets and the Murdochs, clashing over drugs, extortion, and raw territorial supremacy. What started as a turf skirmish over heroin deals and pub protection rackets exploded into shootings, grenade blasts, machete hacks, and a murder that ignited street riots. This wasn't just a gang war, it was a community torn asunder, with innocents caught in the hail of bullets and the flames of arson. Bodies piled up, families fled, and politicians in Westminster scrambled to understand how industrial decay could spawn such anarchy. This is the story of the Craigneuk War, Nisbets versus Murdochs, a savage feud that began with a single confrontation in the early 1990s and raged through a decade of bloodletting, leaving a trail of paralyzed enforcers, torched homes, and a young man dead in the crossfire. From the paralysis of John Murdoch to the execution-style slaying of JH Nisbet, we'll trace every verified hit, every riot, and every desperate plea for peace in a saga that exposed the underbelly of Scotland's post-industrial rot. Welcome to Crime Pulse, where we dig into the cases that scar Britain's communities, giving voice to victims. If you're new here, hit subscribe and join our growing community. Like, share, and turn on notifications. They shove us up the algorithm, letting us unearth more untold tales like this one. Now, brace yourself. We're heading to Craigneuk, the scheme that bled for a decade. Craigneuk wasn't always a war zone. In the shadow of Motherwell's steel mills, this tight-knit estate of low-rise flats and terraced homes was a working-class heartbeat. Kids kicking footballs on Golf Hill Road, pubs buzzing with shift workers from the pits, and families scraping by on overtime. But Thatcher's 1980s closures gutted the jobs. Ravenscraig's 1984 shutdown alone axed thousands, fueling a heroin influx that ravaged Lanarkshire, with overdoses spiking as unemployment hit 50% by 1994, per government reports. Desperation bred opportunity, and opportunity bred predators. Enter the Murdochs, a clan of 3 brothers, William, John, and Alan, led by their iron-fisted patriarch, David Murdoch, a 61-year-old ex-crane driver from the Ravenscraig works. The Murdochs weren't subtle. They ruled Wishaw's drug trade with a chokehold, peddling smack from safe houses in Craigneuk and squeezing publicans for protection money. If you refuse, your windows got smashed, your stock torched, witnesses vanished or recanted under threats. The brothers operated from their family homes on Glencairn Avenue, a row of unassuming semis that doubled as fortresses. William, the strategist, orchestrated the deals. John, the hothead, handled enforcement. Alan, the wild card, brought the muscle. No one crossed them without paying in blood or broken bones. Their empire was worth tens of thousands a week in heroin and extortion, propping up a lifestyle of flash cars and fenced-off gardens amid the scheme's poverty. 2 miles away, in the heart of Craigneuk, the Nisbet family was rising. Headed by James Nisbet, a 40-something property magnate with fingers in tobacco smuggling, waste management, and land deals. He sold industrial plots near Newmains for over £12 million in the 1990s. The Nisbets were old-school operators. James owned chunks of Lanarkshire real estate, from scrapyards to storage depots, with Platinum Waste Solutions serving as a legit front for laundering drug profits, as later exposed in 2014 civil suits over his slain nephew's estate. His wife Patricia and sons, Stephen, James Jr., and ambitious nephew John JH Nisbet, ran the operations. But JH, just 19 when the feud ignited, was the spark. Charismatic, ruthless, and wired with the street smarts of a scheme kid who'd seen his uncles dodge the law since the 70s. JH saw the Murdochs' monopoly as a gap to fill. With cousins Sean and Stephen Nisbet as his crew, he started small, slinging heroin cut with baking soda, undercutting Murdoch prices by 20%. It was a direct slap. Nisbets muscling into the patch, using family ties to pubs terrorized by the brothers. The confrontation came in 1992. William Murdoch cornered JH on Craigneuk Street, outside are bookies buzzing with punters. "This is our manor, wee man," he snarled, according to whispers from locals too scared to go on record. JH, all bravado and no back down, laughed it off. "Plenty room for everyone, Billy." But there wasn't. That night, a Nisbet associate's car was torched on Laurel Drive. Retaliation followed. A Murdoch enforcer was beaten with a baseball bat outside the Royal Oak pub. The fuse was lit. What followed wasn't a clean war. It was a sloppy, freeway melee when the Murdochs recruited the Longmire family as allies. The Longmires, another Craigneuk clan with a rep for car theft and debt collection, refused at first. But when they balked, the Murdochs turned on them too. Suddenly, Craigneuk was a triangle of terror. Nisbets versus Murdochs versus Longmires. Shootings in broad daylight, machete ambushes in alleyways, arson that lit up the night sky. Over months, the violence maimed a dozen, terrorized hundreds, and turned neighbors into silent sentinels. Police logs from Strathclyde Constabulary overflowed, but the code of silence held firm. No witnesses, no convictions. Craigneuk wasn't just bleeding, it was hemorrhaging its soul. By summer '93, the air in Craigneuk hung heavy with paranoia. Kids played indoors after dark. Pubs shuttered early. The Murdochs, feeling the squeeze from Nisbet encroachments, doubled down. Their response was a military-grade statement. On a muggy August evening, as families barbecued on patchy lawns, a hand grenade, sourced from Irish paramilitary contacts via Belfast smugglers, detonated outside David Murdoch's home on Glencairn Avenue. The blast ripped through the night. Shrapnel shredded the front door, windows exploded inward like glass rain, and the porch collapsed in a fireball. David, inside watching Match of the Day, escaped with cuts and tinnitus. His wife Betty, shielding their grandson in the kitchen, suffered blast trauma to her legs. Shards embedded so deep surgeons needed tweezers. Eyewitnesses, those brave enough to speak later, described the getaway, a stolen Vauxhall Cavalier screeching away, traced to a Nisbet sympathizer in Motherwell. No direct link stuck, but the message roared. Nisbets meant business. JH, holed up in his Laurel Drive flat with burner phones and a stash of uncut heroin, reportedly toasted the hit with his crew. Police forensics pulled grenade fragments etched with RN markings, Royal Navy surplus, black market fodder. But the investigation stalled. Locals clammed up, fearing reprisals. The blast wasn't just an attack, it was a declaration. Craigneuk's war had gone explosive, and the scheme's fragile peace shattered like the Murdoch's bay windows. Within weeks, tit-for-tat arson hit 3 Nisbet-linked garages on Main Street, new mains, tires melted, tools fused in 1,000-degree infernos. The Longmires, caught in the middle, torched a Murdoch safe house in retaliation, forcing Alan Murdoch to flee to a cousin's in Airdrie. The triangle tightened, and the body count loomed. Winter gripped Lanarkshire like a vice, frost glazing the potholed streets of Craigneuk. John Murdoch, the clan's enforcer with a ledger of unpaid debts tattooed on his knuckles, thought he was untouchable. A former boxer turned debt collector, he'd pistol-whipped more than one Nisbet runner into submission. But on December 17th, 1993, as he swaggered home from the Iron Horse pub, pockets heavy with extortion cash, a shadow detached from the fog on Golf Hill Road. 3 figures, masked in balaclavas, waited in ambush. JH Nisbet, Sean, and Stephen, armed with a sawn-off shotgun stolen from a Lanarkshire farmer, unleashed hell. The first blast caught John in the neck, severing nerves like snapped guitar strings. Pellets shredded his spine, lodging in his vertebrae. He crumpled, gurgling blood onto the icy pavement, legs twitching, then still. A second shot to the legs ensured survival, but not mobility. Paramedics airlifted him to Glasgow Royal Infirmary, where surgeons marveled he lived. John woke paralyzed from the chest down, a 260-pound vegetable in a hospital bed, his empire reduced to whispers through a voice box. The hit was surgical, planned over weeks in JH's flat, reconnaissance from a stolen bike, escape route mapped via back closes. Police pieced it from shell casings, 12-gauge, double-aught buckshot, and a discarded glove with Sean's DNA. At the High Court in Glasgow, April 1994, JH, Sean, and Stephen faced attempted murder charges. The trial was a farce. Witnesses vanished, alibis stacked like Jenga. Prosecutors cited corroborative evidence failures amid proven threats. One key witness recanted after vandalism to their home. It was like pulling teeth from a ghost, the prosecutor later griped. All three walked free, acquitted amid jeers from Murdoch loyalists in the gallery. John, wheeled out in a halo brace, vowed revenge from his hospital bed. The paralysis wasn't just physical, it fractured the Murdochs. William Murdoch ramped up heroin imports from Liverpool, flooding the scheme to choke Nisbet supply lines. But the cost was alarming. Overdoses spiked, 3 kids dead in '94 alone, needles in playgrounds. Craigneuk mourned quietly, but the war deafened all. The boiling point came on August 25, 1994, a balmy Thursday when Craigneuk exhaled in false hope. Alan Murdoch, fresh from a 2-year stretch for firearms possession, strutted like reclaimed territory. Out to reclaim face after his brother's crippling, he targeted a Longmire associate rumoured to be feeding Nisbet intel. At the junction of Glencairn Avenue and Craigneuk Street, Alan and 2 cousins cornered a man with a sawn-off shotgun, the same make that felled John. But Douglas Bryce, an innocent bystander, just a mechanic offering a Murdoch a jump start on his stalled Ford Sierra, stumbled into the fray. Trying to play peacemaker, Douglas yelled, "Lads, pack it in." Alan, twitchy on cheap speed, wheeled and fired. The blast tore through Douglas's chest, exiting in a spray of red mist. He collapsed, gasping, his white t-shirt blooming crimson as neighbors screamed from windows. Alan fled in the Sierra, but not before Douglas's mate noted the plates, traced to a Murdoch garage. Douglas clung for 48 hours in intensive care, his mum Margaret at his bedside, whispering prayers. He flatlined at dawn 2 days later, the 14th victim of the Feud's indirect toll. The scheme erupted. By noon, hundreds poured onto the streets, mums with prams, grannies with rolling pins, steel workers in high-vis. They targeted Murdoch homes, windows smashed with bricks, cars rammed by stolen vans. Murdoch must go, daubed in whitewash on walls. Betty Murdoch barricaded her door as flames licked the curtains of Alan's semi. David fired warning shots from an upstairs window, scattering the mob. Strathclyde police, outnumbered 20-1, called in riot squads from Glasgow, tear gas canisters popping like fireworks, rubber bullets thudding into flesh. Over 50 arrests, dozens injured, including a cop with a fractured skull from a hurled paving slab. The riots made national headlines. BBC crews dodging bottles, tabloids screaming, "Craigneuk's Bloody Sunday." In Westminster, Labour MP Jimmy Hood tabled urgent questions, blasting police, inaction, and demanding a government inquiry. A report followed, fingering economic neglect. £2 million pledged for youth clubs, but it rang hollow amid the grief. Alan was nicked days later, charged with murder, but witnesses melted away. He walked in October 1995, the judge citing insufficient evidence in a packed courtroom, with jurors noting the pervasive code of silence. The Longmires, battered, sued for peace, allying loosely with Nisbets to oust the Murdochs. By '96, the brothers slunk to Edinburgh, their empire in ruins. But the scar, Douglas's mural on Golf Hill Road, still weeps paint. An innocent life taken too soon. Peace was a myth. 5 years on, JH Nisbet, now 25 and a heroin baron in his own right, eyed expansion. From Craigneuk, he'd built a network. Couriers to Edinburgh, laundered cash through Uncle James's platinum waste solutions. But ambition invites assassins. On October 12, 1999, JH and associate William Lindsay, 26, drove east in a hired BMW, scouting a drop-off in Haddington. They never returned. Their bodies surfaced at dawn on the 13th, in a remote East Lothian field off the A1. Shot execution style in the back of the skull with .38 revolvers, then doused in petrol and torched. JH's face was unrecognizable, charred flesh peeling like old wallpaper. Lindsay's wallet, singed but intact, ID'd him. Forensics screamed gangland. Close-range shots, no struggle, accelerant traces from a Murdoch-linked garage. Whispers pinned it on William Murdoch, exiled but vengeful, hiring Edinburgh heavies for £10,000. Prime suspect was Edinburgh hardman Lee Smith, linked via JH's last phone call, who died in 2012 without charges. A burned-out Cavalier in Tranent yielded fibres tying back to Wishaw garages. But the case went cold despite a 2000 joint Strathclyde-Dartlovian probe, which confirmed the field as a secondary disposal spot. JH's flat yielded burner phones logged with threats. "Time's up, Johnny boy." The funeral packed St. Ignatius Church in Wishaw. 500 mourners, bagpipes wailing Flower of Scotland. James Nisbet eulogized his nephew as a fighter, taken too soon, but eyes darted to shadows. Police, led by Pat Byrne, chased ghosts. No arrests. The hit echoed. Stephen Nisbet, JH's cousin, jailed in 2003 for life, 18 minimum, for torturing and murdering David James in Craigneuk, beaten, iron-branded, hurled from a window, bludgeoned with slabs. Vengeance for JH, prosecutors called it. The Nisbets endured, but the war's embers glowed. The Craigneuk War claimed 14 lives directly, shootings, overdoses, suicides in its wake, and maimed twice that. John Murdoch, paralyzed, died in 2005 from complications. His last words a curse on the Nisbets. Douglas Bryce's mum, Margaret, campaigned till her death in 2010, founding a victims' trust that saved 200 addicts. Families splintered, Longmires scattered to Falkirk, Murdochs to oblivion. The scheme, regeneration cash poured in, new flats, a community centre, but the trauma lingers. Kids still whisper of the troubles, murals fade, but memories don't. Operation Spotlight, Strathclyde's 1995 probe, netted 22 convictions. Firearms, drugs, extortion, though only 30% witness cooperation due to the code of silence. Post-Feud, the fallout continued. James Jr. jailed in the 2000s for firearms. A 2009 proceeds of crime order hit a Murdoch widow for over £100,000 in tainted assets. Stephen, from his cell, ran a £1 million heroin ring till 2015, adding 12 years. Unresolved threads haunt. A 2014 Nisbet family tragedy saw a 16-year-old relative's unexplained death in Wishaw, ruled accidental but shadowed by feud stress. And in 2025, David Nisbet, a clan scion, was jailed for 13 years in a plot to assassinate a grass, handgun in tow. His accomplice, Declan McCuish, bringing priors for racial abuse against Rangers players into the mix, highlighting tangled personal histories. This wasn't glamour, it was generational rot. Steel gone, smack in, hope out, Craigneuk rebuilt, but the war's ghosts patrol the closes, reminding that in forgotten corners, betrayal costs more than blood. So, what do you reckon? Could Craigneuk's peace hold, or is another spark waiting? Drop your thoughts below. Your stories keep this real. If the underworld's pull hooked you, subscribe, bell on, and join the pulse. This is Crime Pulse, truth over terror. Stay vigilant out there.